What's going on, YouTube? Smolder here, and I actually just kind of want to pose the question to you guys and make a... I don't know how long this video is going to be, but what things need to change in modern video games? And this is going to be kind of general. Obviously, there are exceptions to the rules on both sides. There are plenty of games that are actually amazing and fantastic in so many ways, and there are some games that are absolute dumpster fires in so many ways on that spectrum. But I think a lot of people can agree that a lot of games, especially in modern games in the last few years, even if they have a lot of really good elements and are well polished, they're all kind of going down the same route of games that are developers are making games that are catering to the smallest denominator, the lowest denominator, the whatever's going to get them the most players, and generally that means by making the game as dumbed down as possible, making the game... I guess what I'm trying to say is a game for everyone is a game for no one. I've seen that quote many times online and in things like that, and I agree with it pretty heavily. For example, I want to talk about From Software. I'm a huge fan of Dark Souls. I actually started with Dark Souls 2, and then after 2 I went and played Dark Souls 1, and then when 3 came out, huge fan of Bloodborne, Sekiro. Elden Ring is their most successful game by far. However, for me personally, it is actually one of my least favorite games by From Software. It's one of my least favorite. Maybe not my least favorite, but it's definitely lower on their end. Of course, at this point, we're kind of like, well, Elden Ring's a 9 out of 10 instead of the others are a 9.5 or a 10 out of 10, you know, kind of deal. Although, for me, I think Elden Ring's more of like an 8.5, which is kind of low for From Software. And I think the reason being is because the game is very catered compared to their other games, to a much wider audience, especially after a lot of the updates from the original release of the game, right? They started adding a lot of... On the map, you can now see where the NPCs are currently at on the map, which you could not do that originally at launch. They did many, many things to make the game much more accessible to a lot more people. And I feel like that, for me personally, dumbed down the experience of the game. The best parts about Elden Ring are the legacy dungeons, which is essentially kind of the whole element of the previous games. But now they're kind of spread out. Again, don't get me wrong, I still love the game. I still think it's a fantastic and amazing game. But the game's gotten, you know, more and more so. And kind of one of the things that really brought this up to me, I mean, I've thought about this for a long time, but with Monster Hunter Wilds being released, a lot of discussion has been like, man, this game is just so much easier than the previous titles. And longtime fans of the franchise have been like, well, that's every single game. Every single Monster Hunter game has gotten easier and easier and easier and easier and easier, more dumbed down, just every single iteration of the game. I started with Monster Hunter World, so I can't really say too much in that regard. However, just from playing World and playing Wilds, I did play Rise, but I don't have... And I did everything in Rise, but it was like a one-time deal, whereas World I put hundreds of hours in. I like Wilds. I like Wilds a lot. But comparing it to World, it's clear that it is much, much easier. And I think that's partially due to the fact that the game engages you with the monsters in the hunts much, much more and consistently, which is a good thing, I think. However, the addition of the focus mode, has also made it where it's significantly easier to land all of your hits, all of your attacks. It is extremely easy to get all the parts you need for crafting your weapons and gear. You can get it significantly faster, so you're going to get better gear at a much faster rate. Therefore, it just expedites the whole process. Monster Hunter World, I think my first time playing through the game before the DLC, through the base game and doing all that stuff, took me around 100 hours, I would say. In Wilds, I pretty much did everything there is to do in less than 50 hours. You know, I mean, I could still, farm and like min-max every weapon, I guess, if I wanted to, but I don't really have any desire to do that. But this is one side of everything that we're talking about. See, I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing. But then we can also talk about all the other stuff about what needs to be changed in modern video games. Okay. Obviously, one thing. Quest markers everywhere. Yes? No. I will say, I do think it depends on the game. I heavily think it depends on the game. But if you're playing something that's a lot more linear based, that just happens to have some side stuff, but still mostly a linear experience, I don't want quest markers everywhere. If I am, however, playing a more fully sandbox open world, you can literally just go anywhere and do anything. The world is massive. Maybe we can put some quest markers, because at that point, I mean, it kind of varies. Other things as well. If the game is a fantasy sci-fi setting, do we want modern dialogue? Do we want the dialogue that characters are talking about in, say, like a high fantasy or a dark fantasy setting or something completely mega sci-fi? Do we want them using terms and terminology and dialogue that is used in modern day today that we use? Do we want to hear skibbity toilet in, the next Dragon Age? Because, I mean, it was already terrible enough as it was with a lot of the dialogue they were using. The overall topics are completely fine, guys. It's the way that they say them. They speak, as if it's 2025, 2024, 2025, or whatever. That makes no sense. To me, that's extremely unimmersive. It's taking me out of the game kind of thing. I don't like it. I don't know. I've seen some things, though, where people are like, I do want that because then I can relate to that. Let me know what you guys think down below. I'm curious. Maybe I'm actually on the minority here. I don't want to hear modern, realistic today's dialogue in a fantasy setting or a ultra sci-fi setting. Now, if the game's obviously supposed to be very realistic or whatever to modern day, totally acceptable, right? It's acceptable for the setting. Other things need to change in video games. Okay, this is something that's not necessarily directly tied to the game itself. Oh, well, it is tied to the game, but paid early access / single player season pass. No. This has been going on for a little while now, actually, and we have some companies, Ubisoft, that have really been abusing this, as well as some other companies that are, and that's more of the single player season pass, than some other companies that are utilizing paid early access, Microsoft, that I think is a terrible thing. I completely disagree with this, monetization / business model and all of that kind of stuff. I think it's terrible, as I think most people do, but it keeps happening. Why? Season Pass has no business in a single player game, because what comes with that is more content locked behind, more paid content, more content behind a paywall but it's for a single player game that's already there. And therefore, they're just trying to squeeze more money out of the consumer, which is stupid. Or you can pay for an unfinished product, essentially, right? So, yeah, you can pay $60 or $70 these days for a game, and you're getting maybe 85% of the game. Or you can pay an extra $20 to get the rest of the game. Like, what? No. That's garbage. Paid early access. We had Avowed come out recently. And if you watched my videos, yes, I did do it. I had my own personal reasons as to why I did it. Because I wanted to focus on Monster Hunter, okay? And I wanted to finish the game. Yes, I'm part of the problem. But it's still a terrible thing. It shouldn't exist, right? Like, I don't... If you're one of the 5 people in the world that actually thinks these things should exist, you know, leave a comment down below, you know? I don't know. I think it's an absolutely terrible thing. What else do we want to talk about of things that need to get not taken out of, but need to change in modern video games? This is going to possibly be maybe a more controversial thing, but when it comes to like actors in video games, voice actors and things like that, I stop using facial likeness of voice motion capture actors. I personally don't like this. I really, really don't. Maybe my view of this will change because I actually have some friends that do like it, because what's the difference between that and like a TV show or a movie? But in my mind, it's even more so immersive breaking, because then I'm like, well, I know that actor is also a real person. Whereas when I watch a movie, I'm like, yeah, I know that's a real person, but I know they're playing this role. And I know it's still the same thing in this regard too. But if we're in a video game, what's different about a video game versus a movie or a TV show? It's interactive, it's immersive. It immerses the player to have, you have control in some ways of what's going on, right? I don't know, man. I really don't like that. It feels weird to me. Obviously we're going to use the voice actors. They can be motion capture. What's cool? Christopher Judge playing Kratos, I think is great, right? Because it's not using the likeness of Christopher Judge, but he does a fantastic job voicing, or Troy Baker, who recently did Indiana Jones. Amazing. But then we're seeing all these other games. Death Stranding 2 is coming up, or we just talked about Death Stranding 1, where they're using the actual likeness of the actor for the full mocap and everything like that. Now, there'd be some games that I think, this is actually acceptable for, or that I'm okay with, depending on the game. But if I'm playing, obviously, some kind of fictional, fantasy game or things like that, it really is just, I don't know, man. It doesn't feel right to me. But let me know what you guys think. Again, this is another thing that's like, hey, maybe it's fine. And over time, maybe I will change my perspective on this. I don't know. What else are we going to talk about when it comes to things that need to change in the video game space? There's a lot of things that really need to change, really. But a lot of them can't be changed directly, or a lot of the things that need to be changed are more like, well, we need to stop laying off employees. We need to start paying our employees better. Or, there's all sorts of other things like that. All the companies need to stop being greedy money people or whatever, which not all of them are, but take time and optimize game. Monster Hunter Wilds, we're looking at you, or Capcom in general, because Dragon's Dogma 2 is also just the same problem. And that's also happens with a lot of other games too. It really doesn't make any sense. Excuse me. These are massive companies. and these games still are not optimized? I don't understand. Like, what's going on here, guys? Makes no sense to me. Okay. Stop changing franchises. Oh, that's nice. Franchises genre. / watering down mechanics. This is also another thing I'm going to kind of use as related to Dragon Age. And it's not just with Veilguard. Even Inquisition already was dumbed down mechanics of its previous predecessors, or at least Origins. But at least it wasn't completely bad. But it's like, when you take a game that was ultra heavy RPG, and then now it's just a straight up action game that just has some very light RPG mechanics. I don't know. And this really ties into devs abandoning their player base for a larger new player base. Stop it. To me, I think this is terrible too. There are ways that they can, or should be able to, maintain the integrity and the faithfulness of what the franchises they have built are, and the fans that they have, and the player base that they have, while also being able to garner a new audience. One, you're going to get a new audience and gain more players because, well, let's just face it, there's more and more people every day being into the world and exposed to video games and new gamers every day. You know, if your franchise has been around for 10, 15 years, just naturally you're going to have more people play your game today than they did 15 whatever years ago, for example. Changing and abandoning what made your original games great for and completely, you know, just being like, looking at numbers, being like, well, our old player base is only 20% of the potential of our new player base. Let's just completely screw them over and then get a new, 80% of that pie instead with the new player base. Even though it has, it completely destroys the vision of what our previous games were. Stop doing this. Assassin's Creed is kind of this way as well, but they got kind of lucky with some of their more open world games actually still being pretty good. Obviously, I'm talking more of like Odyssey and Origins. I thought were actually still pretty decent. I didn't really care for Valhalla, but their older games were still, in my opinion, superior. Just saying. I don't know, man. And this is a more personal thing, just due to the nature of the type of games that I play. Stop hand holding the players in every game. Every game these days, it doesn't matter what it is very hand-holdy to the players. This sucks. Even if it is a difficult game, everything, seems to be really hand-holdy. And this was just coming to me too because there is a new game coming out that they're like pushing the narrative forward that they're not going to hold the hand of the player at all. I believe it's called Hell Is Us. And a lot of people are like, yeah, at least what I've been seeing. And that's kind of like me. I'm like, yes, that's what I want. I don't want the games to be holding our hands. And this comes down to, did I even put this in here? I don't remember if I put this on the list. But not every game should be made for everyone. It's just how it is. Is all music supposed to be loved by everyone? No. You're going to like let's just say, for example, you like R&B and hip hop. Okay, cool. I like country music. I'm making examples, by the way. I actually prefer R&B and hip hop, but that's cool. Or, you know, like I like EDM, I like rock music, okay, but and I don't like the others, but that's okay, right? You like what you like, I like what I like. You know, different artists do different things for their fans and things like that. Same thing with movies. Are all movies meant to be, you know, if every single person who watches every single movie doesn't love your movie, therefore it's a failure? No, that's not necessarily true. It's just that's not your type of movie. I'm a guy, so I hate romantic movies. You know, I'm not going to watch one, but does that mean that, you know, the movie's a terrible movie? No. You know, I'm a guy, I prefer like Lord of the Rings or whatever. You know, and if somebody else tells me that movie's terrible, is it, you know, or whatever, I'm not going to yell at them. Be like, you know, that's, you don't like it, that's fine. Video games is the same way, right? So when they start trying to make games that's for everyone, then nobody's going to like it because you're trying to appease too many different types of people. The game's going to get pulled in so many different directions and it's going to be terrible. And too many developers are trying to do this today. And maybe it's not the developers, maybe it's more of the shareholders and the people that are just, you know, all about the money. Obviously, that's going to be a huge talking, you know, that money talks, right? But there's a reason why indie games are honestly, by and large, more successful today in terms of like beloved by gamers. Not necessarily by money standards, or, you know, from that perspective, but in terms of just like what the gamers like. Indie games, I feel like right now are much more successful because it's not about the money. It's just about making a game that they want to make. And I feel like that's how all games should be. Developers shouldn't be making games to meet a quota or like, well, we have to make a game because these players are demanding this kind of game. No, developers should make a game because that's what they want to make. And if people like it, then the people like it. If they don't, they don't. Whatever. You know. Anyways, guys, I don't want this video to go on too long. There's a lot of other stuff. Leave comments down below what other things you guys, you know, that maybe I didn't bring up or whatever, that it needs to change in the video game space when it comes to making games. Things need to change, right? Anything you agree with me on, disagree with me on, let me know down below. Like and subscribe if you want to see or hear more stuff from my terrible thoughts and all of that, because they don't matter. But anyways, thank you for watching.